Praise the Lord, guys. I'm Shaw Greenhorn. Ye fools, ye can discern the face of the sky and of the earth, and you do not discern the times. And why judge ye not according to that which is right? When thou goest to the magistrate with thine adversary, as thou art in the way, take diligence that thou art delivered of him, lest he hail thee to the judge deliver thee to the officer cast thee into prison. I tell thee, thou shalt not depart till thou hast paid the last mite. So the finishing up and the ending of the 12th chapter of Luke. We've been on such a wild story so far. We really ended off with him, rebuking the scribes and the Pharisees and the lawyers. And we saw him give two examples, one of the faithful servant and one of the unwise servant. And, we've been seeing him speak more on the times right now. It's not so much a group of people and their behaviors, their tendencies, their identifying traits, which, unto them, they seem righteous and they believe that what they are doing is right and they are in the right. But Jesus, he's giving them true doctrine, true knowledge, and showing how the eyes of God is looking at these things. The benefit unto us is that we have these things to look as an example, because what a heartbreak it would be to get there at the end and then be told that you were wrong. Could you not tell me along the way that I was wrong? Could you not send somebody? Could you not even inspire me to change my thought? Could you not do something? And here he is, giving all these instructions, showing the true way. So, the benefit is so great. These things, they can be applied to us. The principle can always be applied. If the specific case is, it seems distant, the components of the principle, can be, reassembled to even create something else, to create something more. So, we see him here, just this is the conclusion of the last parable. How, if they saw the cloud rise from the west, they say that there shall be shower in a straight way, and it come to pass. And how when the south wind blow, he said that there will be heat, and even that cometh to pass also. Observing how nature moves. Pattern recognition is really what he's emphasizing here, and how things, they mean what they mean. If you pay attention to life, there are so many things to be learned. Any subject that you study, it came from observations. The mathematician, Einstein, when the apple was it him that the apple fell and hit, he came up with E equals mc squared. If it was, observations. The geographer, how they studied the earth, the movement, the motion, the mountain, the language. These things, they're all observation. Now, life itself has, many things like this that operate right in front of you. And, if you ask the old person, usually grandpa, right, how he can tell you so many things, because, he's lived it and he's seen it. He's seen that, year after year after year, when this thing's happen, then it leads to this other thing. And then this thing follows it. And, what seems like just, random occurrences, he has categorized and classified these into groups. So it's just him telling them to rely on this same principle. Use common sense. If you spill water on the floor, it's gonna be wet, right? And you might fall in there. Simple as that. Don't overthink these things. I think that our minds and even having been taught things that are counterintuitive, the concept counterintuitive, how we look at it and then we'll expect something to intervene. We expect something to intervene to change the meaning, to change the value, to take it from what it is and then translate it into something else. I think a person, even at an old enough age, they have enough experiences where if they were to be able to extract patterns, to extract the wisdom, the outcomes, to extract, things to be learned from these things, how much understanding, one could have. But I think that we go through life every day, we bustle about and it seems as if we're hardly making it, scraping by. How can you reflect if you're barely making it, right? But it's all there, I would say. And as the same point, he's giving them wisdom and he's revealing some of these things unto them. And I also think that some of these things, they're so small that we don't bother to explain them. We don't bother to teach them because it's expected. It would be like telling a person that they need to breathe air, right? To survive. I mean, I know that's a stupid example, right? But things that are so small and you assume that everybody knows them. But how many don't? We each have different perspectives and advantages. An advantage to one might be a disadvantage to another. And, this is where the sharing of information comes in. How we can complete each other. So like I said, these things, some of them are so small. You would never think to teach these things. And as human beings, we like to focus on the big things. If you see anybody that's starting, a new hobby or skill or knowledge base, how they desire to start at the top. How disappointed they are when they have to learn the fundamentals and the basics. They just want to jump right into it. So it's something within us, right? that leads us to go down this pathway, or that we end up on this road. So we see him getting on them, pointing out something so positive, but then associating it with something so negative. You hypocrites, you can discern the face of the sky and the earth, but you do not discern the times. So it is within you to observe. It is within you to pay attention, accurately predict, based on patterns of occurrences, what can be expected to follow. You guys have no problem paying attention to this in certain areas, but then with others you go by hocus pocus. In others, you use even the most unrealistic expectation and reasoning. And where you showed such great common sense in other areas, you fall so flat. Showing them even that it's not hard to make the change and to switch and to apply it also to this. I think that that's another thing that he's trying to get across to them. How possible it is, to not be stuck in a limbo, to not be stuck in assuming the wrong thing. So calling them a hypocrite, because what would be so common sense, and there's also an element of them hiding this thing behind their back, because at some point it does come into view, and it might have been a very small moment, it might have been a small energy, it might have been greater for some, but there is a moment that comes and they choose to conceal these things, trying to hide them behind their back so that they're not visible to the world. So he has all right to call them hypocrites, because at some point it does come up and they chose to go with wrong reasoning. Now the traditions, the standards that were set might have forced them, kind of nudged them down that way, but there was a choice. There was a choice to say no. There was a choice to stand on what's right and common sense. There was a choice, but going with what everybody wanted. Because remember, it was the scribes and Pharisees that he said that they encompass land and sea to find one proselyte, one disciple. And when they find him, they make him a twofold more child of hell than themselves. They indoctrinate him with such error. And this is his standard, starting. So he is starting his whole career in error and being reinforced and encouraged, in this error. And what he's trying to get at is, the hearts of men, the things that are happening, the things that happen, right? How if one were to observe these things, put them together, then you would say something is wrong. I think that, even if you don't understand what it means and you can't get the deep understanding and revelations from it, and you can't see how these things, they point to something, you can at least, marvel that something is wrong, or that, we took a wrong turn somewhere. And even just that, awareness is a starting place. We see him saying, why judge ye not according to what is right? Now, this is a self-realization, even in himself. This kind of reasoning, usually comes from, reasoning out, many things. This kind of, thinking usually comes from reasoning out many things. It takes the assembling of many things together, as he's been dealing with them in this whole 12, pointing out all these things to them that they don't even realize that they're doing. So then now he gets an epiphany, standing among all this knowledge. This kind of knowledge, it only comes with after having reasoned through many things. Why judge ye not according to that which is right? Because, as he assembled one thing, then, he built another one. Then, he put another one. And then, when there was like, many of these standing around, then he took a glimpse at all of them. And, that it meant something. And this is what it meant. And this is what he's telling them. And it would be simple enough to judge according to what is right. So, in this, you can hear his voice tone. Now, we hear the human side of him speaking, the compassionate side, not being crowned in the power of God, clothed in the power of God, not having made the world, not, having all power being given into his hands, but just as a concerned human being. Because how much better would the world be? How much better would you be? It's almost as if we chose the lesser thing that's gonna, hurt us and bring so much disadvantages, when the right thing is so much easier and simpler. They always say that the truth, you don't need to remember it, because the truth remembers itself. The truth, stands up questioning and interrogation. The truth, stands up to speculation. The truth doesn't need to be reinforced by anyone. It's lies that have to be covered with other lies. So them not judging according to what is right. They look at something and it's simple enough. And I think that what's missing is their humanity and compassion. Because there's a hardening of the heart. And with the hardening of the heart, somebody's being affected. Somebody's being trampled upon. Somebody's liberties are being taken for granted, taken advantage of. Somebody is suffering. This is hurting somebody. And that's the person that they're not going to be able to look in the face. So in order for them to look at something and then come up with a erroneous judgment, they have to look over the fact that they're doing somebody wrong. And usually it's the poor and needy, right? So this really is an epiphany of him. Why don't you just do that which is right? And you see the difference in results that you will get. We see him, starting another parable about this, going to the magistrate, with your adversary. So, we understand that the magistrate is the court of law. And the adversary is somebody that's taking you there. And he just said, why do judge ye not that which is right? So, and at one point he spoke a parable, do not rich men, drag you before the magistrate. So, you have wronged somebody in some way here, and they're taking you to court. And he said, while you are in the way, give diligence that you are delivered from him. So while you are in the way, come up with some agreement. You know what needs to be said. You know what can be said or be done. You know what it will take, or you can at least have an idea to appease this person that's dragging you to this court, using common sense. They say Rome was not built in a day. It took a little bit and little bit. He said, line upon line, precept upon precept, he shall teach them, here a little and there a little. Little thing, big things are built by little things, little bricks. So, showing how, he could have been proactive. Because what comes next, you might be hailed, to the judge, and this hailing is pointing out the wrong that was done and having the culprit in hand. And then, asking the judge to judge what is right. And this is so ironic. He just told them because, you did not judge what is right. And now judging, what is right is going to be used against you. Sometimes you reap what you sow, right? So we see him being delivered to the officer into the prison, and thou shalt not depart till thou hast paid the last mite. And how are you gonna pay it if you're in there? And this is a part of the diligence to see that you are delivered from him. You're gonna have to start, come with some negotiating. This, goes along with the parable of steward that was wasteful with his Lord's goods. How he called him and said, give an account of thy stewardship, because thou may no longer be stored. And then he started calling the Lord's debtors. If you owe 100 bags of flour, sit down and write 80. If you owe 50 bags of wheat, sit down and write 20. And how he was commended for doing this. So it's moving things along to present yourself in a favorable way. And if you're in there, then somebody else is gonna have to pay that debt. I don't know if in those days, you did work in prison and you were paid. I don't know. There was a way for the system to pay the debt after having been there for a certain time. But how hard is it gonna be if you are in there and you have to pay this debt and you have no money? So now you're relying on a family member or a friend, to handle what should have been yours to take care of. So now we see him mentioning might. We understand that the might was the smallest currency. We first saw this where the poor widow casting into the treasury while the rich man did. She cast in 2 mites, which make a farthing, the Bible said. And how she did cast in more than them, because she, of her penury, her, poorness, while they being rich, 2 mites make 1 farthing. And, upon doing some research on the internet, I saw that 4 farthings make 1 penny. I know that we look at penny right now in society as the smallest currency. But that's just because inflation has reached so high that these smaller things, they are useless. How many mites will you have to carry around to pay for something? Because if 4 farthings equal 1 penny, and then 2 mites equal 1 farthing, then it would take 8 mites to equal 1 penny. That penny that you throw on the ground, it would take 8 of some other thing just to equal 1. How much less will you want to walk around with something like that? All right, so like I said, finishing up the 12th chapter of Luke, where it started out saying, in the meantime, there was gathered together unto him an innumerable multitude, insomuch that they trod one upon another. Then he began to say unto the disciples, first of all, beware of the leaven of the Pharisee, which is hypocrisy. For there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, none hid that shall not be made known. Whatsoever you have spoken in the dark shall be heard in the light. Whatsoever you have spoken in the ear in the closet shall be proclaimed upon the housetops. Therefore I say unto you, my friends, fear not them which kill the body, and afterwards have nothing more that they can do. But I will forewarn you whom you shall fear. Fear him who after having killed the body hath power to cast into hell. I say unto you, fear him. Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 farthings, and not one of them is forgotten before God? But the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Were not therefore you are of more value than many sparrows. Whosoever shall confess me before men shall be confessed before the angels of God. Whosoever shall deny me before men shall be denied before the angels of God. Whosoever shall speak a word against the Son of Man, it shall be forgiven him. Whosoever shall blaspheme the Holy Ghost, it shall not be forgiven him. And when they shall bring you before the synagogues, magistrates, and powers, take no thought how or what things you shall answer or say. For in that very hour the Holy Ghost shall teach thee what things thou ought to say. And a certain man of the company said unto him, Master, speak to my brother that he divide the inheritance with me. Jesus said, Man, who made me a judge or a divider over you? Then he said unto them, Take heed and beware of covetousness, for a man's life consisteth not in the abundance of things wherein he possesseth. So then he spoke a parable unto them. The ground of a certain rich man brought forth plentifully. Then he said within himself, What shall I do? I have no room where to bestow all my fruits. So then said he to himself, This I shall do. I shall pull down my barns and build greater, and there shall I bestow all my fruits and goods. And I will say unto my soul, Soul, thou hast much goods laid up for many years. Take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said unto him, Thou fool, this night thy very soul shall be required of thee. Then who shall all those things be wherein thou hast provided? So is he that layeth up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God. Therefore he said unto the disciples, Therefore I say unto you, take no thought for your life, what you shall eat, or for the body, what you shall put on. For the life is more than meat, and the body more than raiment. Consider the ravens, they sow not, they reap not, neither have they barns or storehouses. But I say unto you, your heavenly Father feedeth them. How much more better are you than the fowls? And which of you by taking thought can add one cubit to his stature? If you then be unable to do that which is least, why take ye thought for the rest? Consider the lilies, they spin not, they toil not. But I say unto you, Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like unto one of these. If God so clothed the grass which today is in the field, and tomorrow cast into the oven, how much more shall he clothe you, O you of little faith? Therefore seek not what you shall eat, nor what you shall drink, neither be ye of a doubtful mind. For all these things do the nations of the world seek after. But your heavenly Father knoweth that you have need of all these things. But seek ye first the kingdom of God and all his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. All that you have, give alms. Provide yourselves bags that wax not old, and treasures in the heaven that fail not, where no thief approach unto, neither doth moth corrupt. Wheresoever your treasure is, there shall your heart be also. And let your loins be girded about, and your lamps burning. And ye yourselves like unto men that wait for the Lord, when he shall return from the wedding, that when he come and knock, you may open up unto him immediately. Blessed are those servants whom when the Lord shall return shall find them watching. Verily I say unto you, he shall gird himself and make them sit down to meat, and go forth and serve them. And if he shall return in the second watch or in the third watch and find them thus, blessed are those servants. But this know, if the good man of the house had known at what hour the thief cometh, he would have watched and not have suffered his house to be broken through. Be ye therefore also ready, for the Son of Man coming in an hour that you look not for him. Simon Peter said, Master, speakest thou this parable unto us or unto all? Jesus said, Who then is that faithful and wise steward, whom his Lord shall make ruler over all his household, to give them their portion of meat in due season? Blessed is that servant whom when his Lord shall return shall find so doing. Verily I say unto you, he shall make him ruler over all that he had. And if that servant shall begin to say in his heart, My Lord does delay his coming, and shall begin to smite the men servants and maidens, and to eat and drink and be drunken, then the Lord of that servant will return unto him in a day in which he looketh not for him, and in an hour in which he is not aware, shall cut him in sunder, and appoint him his portion with the unbelievers. And that servant which knew his master's will, prepared not himself, neither did according to his will, shall be beaten with many stripes. But he that did not know and did commit things worthy of stripes shall be beaten with fewer stripes. To whom much is given, much shall be required. And unto whom men have committed much, they shall expect the more. I am come to send fire on earth, and what will I if it be kindled already? I have a baptism to be baptized with, and how am I straight until it be accomplished? Suppose ye that I am come to send peace on earth. I tell you, nay, but rather division. For from henceforth there shall be 5 in one household, 2 against 3, and 3 against 2. The son shall be divided against the father against the son, the daughter against the mother against the daughter, the daughter-in-law against the mother-in-law, the mother-in-law against the daughter-in-law. When you see a cloud rise from the west, straightway you say that there shall be shower, and so it is. And when you see the south wind blow, he said, there shall be heat, and it cometh to pass. Alright, so then we pick up right here where it says, Ye hypocrites, you can discern the face of the sky and of the earth. You do not discern the sign of the times. So, this is a great, irony and contradiction, even within our own selves. How, one thing that's great in one area, it does not spill over into other areas. And, if you understand that when learning, that's why you have to go for different, branches of knowledge. It doesn't fill itself in. It's like having individual glasses and pouring water into, each one individually. Not because one glass has been full means that the others will be full also. Knowledge is so specific. But I do say that there's a point, where one can get to where they've learned so much that, it will be easier to learn other things. Because, you'll find that the principles of knowledge are similar across, subjects. It's just that the application is different. The variables, the principles are the same, but the variables change. And I really do understand how, knowledge is, it's like a ball. It's one full circle, and how everything fits together, and it doesn't contradict itself. And with wisdom, it comes understanding this whole thing. Wisdom is taking this knowledge and then being able to form conclusions from it. Because otherwise you're just a knowledgeable person. So we see him calling them hypocrites. You hypocrites. So now a hypocrite is somebody that they say something, but they know in themselves, something else. And this thing that they know in themselves is usually the right thing. This thing that they're overlooking to say this other thing, it's almost like you have to even bite your tongue to be say the thing that you're being hypocritical about, knowing what it is that you know inside. And that's why it's such an offense before God, because the heart can be screaming, the mouth is still, going on as if it doesn't hear the heart. But God hears the heart. So then, there's an element of barefacedness, just being brass and bold, before people. Being able to occupy, parade, like this. How, in your heart, you'll know, something that's usually more honorable, something that's usually more truthful, something that's, more decent, and of a higher nature of character, integrity, and morals, right? You know this on the inside, but yet still, you choose to operate on a lower level, usually, of frequency. And it's because you want to, I would say usually if you observe it, you want to, there's somebody you're trying to fit in with. And you're selling your morals. It's like you're sacrificing it unto them. Hoping that they, highly regard you, for this thing. Not understanding that, a man's integrity is who he is. Not understanding that, his character is what brings him, reputation. It's what's gonna, determine his destination in life. Because this hypocrite, they continue. At some point, they're gonna get cut down. At some point, they're gonna fall. Because you can't live in a house of glass. How easy is it gonna be to collapse, even the weight of itself? And building a house of hypocrisy is not a stable house, and you're gonna cross people along the way, and you're always gonna have to be looking over your shoulder. And when you tell these lies to get what it is that you're after, then what are the people gonna think that you lied to when they see you with this thing? And now, they didn't get what they were supposed to get. You have a huge target on your back. So you hypocrites, you can discern the face of the sky on the earth. So like I said, this was said, when you see the cloud rise in the west, how there shall be a shower. And when the salt wind blow, there shall be heat. And I explained this yesterday, how the air moves from the west to the east. So this cloud, as it moves, it gets moisture, and then when it rises, it cools, and then you get rain. The salt wind, the equator is the hottest, where the sunshine is the hottest, and the evaporation of water is what moves, which creates the wind. So then when it moves north, then this wind, it carries the heat, and that's where you get the warmth. So you can discern the face of the sky. You can look after a year, first of all, after people having told you, what to look for. And then, you armed with this knowledge over time, pay attention and see that they were right. So then, is that not a disadvantage? These scribes and Pharisees teaching all these half-truths and no truths, because then now they are armed with this, and now they go to this thing. So then can one not say then that the scribes and Pharisees, the religious teachers, are fault for this, for leading the people astray? And it shows the irony of life sometimes also, right? Because, if they'll be so serious and so honest and, so dead center correct about the weather, but yet still here we have, faith and God and your soul, and they're willing to be so loose. Is that not ironic that they're willing to be so strict about the thing that doesn't matter? What if it rains or does not? Especially in those days, right? But yet still, where you're gonna spend eternity, they are willing to gamble and make jokes. I find this, they're making jokes, with their own soul and just having the time of their lives. So you can discern the face of the sky and earth, but you do not discern the times. You do not discern the times, the conflict between men, the dishonor. You do not discern the times, the things that happen each day that you hear about in the news. You do not discern the time, how all these things are happening, all these misfortunes and disasters, crime, poverty, starvation. And this is looking at it from God's eyes, right? Because he sees these things all day. So, like I said, the hypocrite. So, like I said, why he's calling them, this hypocrite is because they put so much time in discerning the weather, but then none in discerning. Because just as how this cloud is able to predict rain and this wind is able to predict heat, then the human behavior is able to predict something. And they spend all this time studying those things, but then none of the time to study this. I think that's the straightest answer I can give you concerning that. All right, so the next verse says, and why, judge ye not according to what is right. So, there's even a sense of grief also in his soul. If only, it's like you say, if only you would judge according to what is right. It's like he's asking for help. Because, if we do right, we help God. Do we not? I know that God, he is great. He is judge. He can give life. He can take it. He can send you to hell or heaven. But, what he cannot do and what he does not do is force you to do right. He give us free will, right? And we can help God by doing right. Why judge ye not according to that which is right? After having all this, wisdom and insight and knowledge, you choose to still go, the wrong way. Do you not understand that it takes more energy to keep up this charade than to simply tell the truth and go with what is honorable? I wonder if people think that if they don't create chaos, then life will stop moving. Do people believe that if they just do honor, then, there's nothing that's gonna be left to go forward? That life only goes forward with chaos, because chaos is it has more energy and it's more animated. Chaos, it just seems more, while integrity is so quiet, right? Honor is so quiet, character is so quiet. Do people think that they will be lost in forgetfulness in doing what's right? He's actually telling them that I think it's harder to do wrong and easier to do right. But yet still, you will expend all this energy to do wrong. You will do wrong. It will cost you all these things, but yet still you still do them. You do wrong. It will have all these negative outcomes. It will set you back. It will stunt your growth and progress. It will jeopardize your soul to do wrong. It's a walk-in, contradiction. Remember when, sin entered, these things came. And, sin has a life of its own. And it does take hold of men. And, if I was there, I could answer him and tell him that, it's sin. Sin has a life of its own. And you have to wrestle against it. So why judge ye not according to that which is right? Why do men take pleasure in wrongdoing? Why are they so willing to tell the rich he is right and the poor that he is wrong? The lowly esteem the poor, fatherless, and widow, to esteem the rich. The things that men hold highly in their heart. How God, despises these things. And the irony is at the end of the day, they're gonna want, God's approval and not men's. When they die, they're gonna want to hear, well done from God, and not depart from me. So you spend your whole life chasing, what men want. But then when you die, you want to have the heart of God. When you spend your whole life chasing men. Because, ultimately, why do you not that which is right? Is because, they seek after men, their standards, and not after God and God's standard. When God said, thou shalt not lust, thou shalt not commit adultery or fornication. But then, you see that female and she's so desirable, right? When God said, thou shalt not steal. But then, you see that shiny jewel. Then you think of, all the things, if you sell it, what you can get for it. And how that can change your life. There's often a great perceived, benefit. I would say a perceived benefit. Because men, they reason in their own minds and they come up with all these kind of things. I would bet that people that rob like, grocery stores, convenience stores and stuff like that, they think that with this robbery, is gonna, solve all the problems that they have for the rest of their life. Just this one thing. When that, is gonna be done by the end of the week. By next week, they're gonna be looking for. So why judge ye not according to that which is right? Such a simple question. He's inviting you on the water like he did with Peter when Peter said, can I come on the water? He's inviting them on the water with this one. Why judge ye? Because he's out there and he's doing what is right. He's teaching what is right. He's believing what is right. There's no messed up traditions in his doctrine. We just saw him not wash before dinner and they made such a big deal out of it. Then he showed them how they tithe mint and rue and all manner of herbs, but then they forget judgment and the love of God. So the next verse says, and when thou goest to the magistrate with thine adversary, as thou art in the way, take diligence that thou art delivered of him. Lest he hail thee to the judge deliver thee to the officer cast thee in prison. So, a warning is also, I see, given here, because, you don't judge what is right, and you're so slack. But then, when you fall into somebody else's hands, and they judge what is right, then, you end up looking like such a fool, right? You end up being, tossed to and fro and wishy-washy. You're low-hanging fruit. You're rotten, poisoned fruit. And how you can behold honor in another. And that further squeezes out your character and, integrity. You might as well, be nothing. You gave your position away by not judging right. And now here's somebody holding up their position. So, understand that at some point, something happened. You borrowed money, you didn't pay it back. You took goods, you never paid for it. You caused damage to his property, himself, a loved one, or, his flock. You did something to cause this man loss. He's coming for his justice. So he's taking you to the magistrate. So when thou art in the way, don't wait till you get there. Now is the time to get creative. The negotiate is basically what he's saying. Whatever it is that was lost, how can you make it right? The first answer you give, he might not say yes. You might have to keep, increasing the price on what you will restore, before he says yes, if he will say yes. So, take diligence that thou art delivered. You appease his anger and, try to get him to have mercy on you. Because he's going to hail you to the judge. Tell the judge everything was wrong. And he's going to present it in such a way that the judge is going to look at you and you see the outcome, he'll give you to the officer put you in prison. And the last verse says, and I tell thee, thou shalt not depart till thou hast paid the last mite. So you're making full restitution. How hard is it going to be, when you are in a prison? You can't work and make money. Somebody's going to have to pay that debt for you. And depending on how valuable you are to people, you might not get out. So the mite is the smallest unit of currency. We just saw him say, are not 5 sparrows, so for 2 farthings. So then 2 mites make 1 farthing. So these 5 sparrows are for 2 farthings or 4 mites. And it will take 4 farthings to make 1 penny. I am Straw Greenhorn.